Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid and these are the headlines. US President Donald Trump says he will reimpose international sanctions against Iran at the UN next week. Talking to reporters, Trump said Washington will trigger the snapback mechanism as he dismissed Russia's call to hold a summit to discuss the matter. This comes a day after the UN Security Council rejected Washington's bid to extend a UN arms embargo on Tehran. Israel says its warplanes have hit Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip in response to rocket attacks. The Israeli army says the raids followed a night of cross-border clashes with Palestinian protesters. The Gaza Health Ministry said Israeli gunfire at the protesters wounded 2 Palestinians. Globally, the novel coronavirus pandemic has taken over 770,000 lives and infected more than 21.4 million people. In the US, nearly 1,100 people have died due to COVID-19, while nearly 50,000 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Brazil has registered over 41,000 new cases and 709 deaths in a day. India has recorded 944 fatalities, taking the toll to nearly 50,000, with almost 2.6 million cases. In Pakistan, the death rate continues to decline as 6 people have died overnight, taking the tally to 6,100. News coming in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now for the news in detail. US President Donald Trump says he will reimpose international sanctions against Iran at the UN next week. Talking to reporters, Trump said Washington will trigger the snapback mechanism. Talking about Russia's call to hold a virtual summit on the matter, Trump said his participation was unlikely before the US presidential poll in November. This comes a day after the UN Security Council rejected Washington's bid to extend a UN arms embargo on Tehran. Meanwhile, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said the failed UN vote was a humiliating defeat for Washington.
This is the first time that the US has proposed a resolution to the UN Security Council, and only a small island nation has voted in favor of it. Look, where America's effort have got them. What a miserable situation they have reached. Yesterday was a political success for the Islamic Republic of Iran and a political and legal defeat for the US regime.
Meanwhile, Israel says its warplanes have targeted multiple locations on the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the Israeli military said its warplanes have hit Hamas positions in response to rocket attacks. It said the raids followed a night of cross-border clashes with Palestinian protesters. The Israeli army alleged dozens of Palestinians burned tires, hurled explosive devices towards its security fence. The Gaza Health Ministry said Israeli gunfire at the protesters wounded 2 Palestinians. Thousands of Israelis have called for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's resignation over corruption allegations and his handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Protesters clashed with the police outside the residence of the embattled Prime Minister. Details in this report.
Netanyahu's approval ratings have plunged to under 30% in recent weeks due to graft allegations and tumbling economy. The economy is expected to contract by 6% and unemployment in the country stands at 21.5%. Protesters called Netanyahu a crime minister, criticizing the government over its failure to protect jobs and businesses.
He did so many wrong things to his people, to us. The corruption is above of it, okay? He's corrupted, he's mean, he's cynical, and he's using us, and he's a thief, and he's a dictator. Simply as that, dictator.
Netanyahu's right-wing party accused the left-wing faction of backing the riots while censoring the media over alleged anti-government propaganda.
Now, 2 rockets have hit Iraq's Taji base, housing US-led coalition troops in the north of the capital city of Baghdad. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Miles Kagan said there were no casualties as no one was in the vicinity of the impact. Coalition military bases have been a target of regular rocket attacks since October last year. In the past, the US blamed hardline elements of the armed Hashid al-Shabi networks for the attacks. Moving on now, Turkey says it has killed 9 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in the northern Iraq. The Defense Ministry said the military operations were carried out in the Haftanin, Zab and Avasin regions. It said 3 fighters were killed in Haftanin while 6 others in Zab and Avasin. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapons caches and shelters used by the terrorists. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months, with 143 killed in the last 10 days. Ankara launched operations Claw Tiger and Claw Eagle earlier in June to neutralize the threat of PKK and other terrorist groups. Globally, the novel coronavirus pandemic has taken over 770,000 lives and infected more than 21.4 million people. In the United States, nearly 1,100 people have died due to COVID-19, while nearly 50,000 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Brazil has registered over 41,500 new coronavirus cases and 709 deaths in a single day. More details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to wreak havoc across the globe as several regions face a re-emergence of the deadly disease. The virus has overwhelmed healthcare facilities and people's daily lives in Latin American countries of Mexico and Brazil. In the US, President Donald Trump lauded his administration's efforts to contain the virus, despite the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warning of another deadly wave during the approaching fall season.
If you look at these numbers, they're coming down very substantially. And I do believe that Americans, many are wearing masks, which is a good thing. Again, some people thought that you shouldn't wear masks. You know, when this whole thing started, Dr. Fauci, who I like and respect, said don't wear masks, okay? And so did Dr. Redfield. And then all of a sudden, it was like everybody should wear masks. And that's okay. People can change their mind.
In Europe, the virus is surging once again in Germany as the UK imposed mandatory quarantine for travelers from the country as well. France is looking to enforce mandatory mask wearing in workplaces, with 252 new clusters reported in the country. Elsewhere, authorities in New Zealand are scrambling to contain the disease by introducing fresh lockdowns after 13 people tested positive overnight.
Turning to the 12 cases in the community, all are Auckland-based. And based on our current information, none has travelled outside the Auckland region recently. From early investigations, all have a connection to the existing outbreak as close contacts of cases already reported. So saying, 2 of the new cases are household contacts of the case we've previously reported that is still under investigation.
South Korea has reported over 200 cases during the last 24 hours, the most infections in a day in over 5 months. Meanwhile, China has reported 19 new COVID-19 cases on the mainland.
Meanwhile, in India, the death toll from COVID-19 has neared 50,000 as the country reported 944 fatalities in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 63,489 new cases were recorded, with the tally crossing 2.5 million. There are over 677,000 active cases in the country. India has been reporting over 60,000 cases daily since August 7th. India remains the 3rd worst hit country from the coronavirus after the US and Brazil. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, new cases and deaths from COVID-19 continue their downward trend, and experts believe the country is flattening the curve. The Health Ministry says in the last 24 hours, 6 people have died while 670 tested positive for the virus. The country's death toll stands at 6,168, while the reported infections are over 288,000. The ministry says as much as 90% of patients have recovered. It said the number of active cases has reduced to 16,000. Welcome back now. Facebook has reportedly ignored its hate speech policy and allowed anti-Muslim posts on its platform to avoid ruining the relationship with India's ruling party. A Wall Street Journal report says a top company executive in India refused to apply the company's hate speech rules to Bharatiya Janata Party politicians. It said Anki Das opposed applying the rules to Tiger Raja Singh and at least 3 other Hindu nationalist individuals and groups. The report said the right-wing politician had demanded mainly Muslim Rohingya refugees be shot. He called India's Muslim traitors and threatened to demolish mosques in his Facebook posts and public speeches. In March, Facebook employees responsible for policing the platform suggested banning his account. The report said that Das told staff members that punishing violations by politicians from Modi's party will damage the company's business prospects. Now, France has asked the Afghan government not to release Taliban fighters who are convicted of killing French citizens. Kabul is in the process of releasing last Taliban prisoners as it aims to conduct peace talks with the group. France's foreign ministry expressed concern over freeing the fighters convicted of crimes against French soldiers and humanitarian workers. It said France strongly opposes the decision and has asked the Afghan government not to proceed with the release, while Afghanistan has already released 80 of the 400 Taliban prisoners. Earlier, the Taliban accused Kabul of propagating against its prisoners to halt the start of intra-Afghan negotiations. Now, Belarus says Russia has pledged its comprehensive assistance to ensure the security of the country. State media said Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko and Russia's President Vladimir Putin discussed the ongoing Minsk protests over the phone. Moscow is yet to confirm any agreement in this regard. In a statement, Kremlin said the ongoing crisis following last Sunday's presidential elections in Belarus will be resolved soon. This comes as hundreds of thousands are out on the streets of Minsk protesting alleged rigging in Lukashenko's secured a 6th term in office. In the violent clashes, 1 person has been killed while authorities have detained thousands of protesters. In Russia, nearly 2,000 people have marched in the city of Khabarovsk against the government's handling of a local political crisis. The protests have entered the 6th consecutive weekend against the detention of Governor Sergei Furgal. Protesters said they do not agree with the government's actions and called it criminal. They said the government robbed their region and cities. Chanting slogans against the Kremlin, the demonstrators demanded the release of Furgal. Khabarovsk popular governors were arrested on murder charges, which he denies. In the United States, right-wing demonstrators have fought with leftist counter-protesters in Georgia, Michigan and Oregon states, drawing in riot police and SWAT teams. This comes as months of anti-racism protests have increasingly pitted Americans against one another. Several dozen demonstrators staged rallies in various states as part of the ongoing Black Lives Matter protest. A mix of militia members, Confederate followers and supporters of President Donald Trump faced off against more than 100 left-wing protesters. After hours of shouting and the burning of a Confederate flag, the protest devolved into scuffles and fistfights. Witnesses say they heard gunshots, but police have not yet commented on the claims. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will consider pardoning former National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden. He is facing criminal charges over leaking classified documents about widespread government surveillance in 2013. At a news conference, Trump said a lot of people believe that Snowden is being treated unfairly. He said his administration will split over the issue as the former NSA contractor had committed some very bad things.
I mean, I'm not that aware of the Snowden situation, but I'm going to start looking at it. There are many, many people. It seems to be a split decision. That many people think that he should be somehow treated differently, and other people think he did very bad things. And I'm going to take a very good look at it.
Snowden is charged with violating the Espionage Act, which carries a prison sentence. Now, the US and South Korea are set to conduct their annual joint military drills this week. This year's exercises will be scaled down and will not involve US-based troops amid COVID-19 travel restrictions. In a statement, South Korea's Joint Chief said the annual drills will focus on a combined defense posture. The statement said the exercises for the transition of wartime operational control on the Korean peninsula will be partly conducted. Meanwhile, North Korea says the planned excursions are a rehearsal for a war. Sudan and Egypt have expressed optimism after the fresh round of negotiations over the Blue Nile Dam dispute. In a Khartoum meeting, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and Egypt's Prime Minister Mustafa Madboui agreed that dialogue is the only way to resolve the long-standing row. Meanwhile, Pope Francis called for dialogue between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan over the Nile Dam issue. Speaking in the Vatican City, the pontiff urged the three neighbors not to let the dispute lead to a conflict. Earlier, the trilateral talks between the three countries were suspended after Ethiopia insisted on renegotiating a deal on sharing the waters of the Blue Nile. A UAE's and an Israeli firm have signed an agreement to cooperate on research and development related to the COVID-19. The UAE state news agency said Apex National Investment agreed on a strategic commercial agreement with Israel's terror group. In a statement, Apex chief said the deal will open pathways to develop effective partnerships between the business sectors of both the countries. It said the treaty will benefit humanity as it aims to strengthen research regarding the pandemic, including a feasible testing device. This comes soon after Tel Aviv and Abu Dhabi announced an agreement to normalize their relations. In the United States, firefighters are still battling a massive blaze near the California and Nevada border. The National Weather Service has warned blaze in Loyalton City could cause potential fire whirls. Authorities say parts of Layton County, situated in the north of the state, are most at threat. They have issued evacuation orders for the Plumas and Layton counties. The Weather Service asked respondents to exercise extreme caution as a dash cam recorder captured a firefight narrowly escaping the inferno. The Loyalton fire has burned around 20,000 acres with 5% containment so far. Investigators believe one major fire near Los Angeles may have been started by arson. A Japanese bulk carrier that has leaked hundreds of tons of oil off the Mauritius coast has broken apart. In a statement, the Mauritius National Crisis Committee said on the basis of the experts' advice, the towing plan is being implemented. Authorities say they have deployed booms to help with oil absorption around the vessel. The committee said it's giving special attention to sensitive sites around the ship. In late July, a Japanese-owned carrier with 4,000 tons of the fuel ran aground on a coral reef, causing an ecological emergency. Tokyo has pledged to send a team of experts from Environment Ministry to assess the damages. Now, the Huju city in eastern China's Zhejiang province has achieved sustainable, high-quality and eco-friendly development. The city has been improved under the guidance of President Xi Jinping's concept of green development over the past 15 years when he was Zhejiang's party head. More about the eco-friendly city in this report.
China's President Xi Jinping proposed the theory of lucid waters and lush mountains as invaluable assets for the first time in 2005. Since then, Huju city in the country's east has integrated the theory into its economic, political, cultural, social and ecological development. This has not only improved the local environment but also brought remarkable economic gains to the local people. Pan Chin Lin, who runs an agritainment business in the village, said he can receive over 200 visitors every day at present.
We can see picturesque sceneries by opening our windows and meet endless streams of guests once opening our gate. This is the happy life created by the President Xi Jinping's theory of lucid waters, and lush mountains are invaluable assets.
Though influenced by COVID-19, the local tourism is picking up once again now that the epidemic is under control and the national economy is recovering. But the environment of the Yusun village, as well as the Huju city, used to be badly damaged 15 years ago due to excessive exploitation of mineral resources. Under the guidance of Xi's theory, Huju city abandoned the extensive mode of development and began to search for industrial transformation and upgrading.
Every year, we would select at least 2 industries and carry out across-the-board upgrading according to the latest green and low-carbon standards. As for energy-intensive and high-polluting projects, no matter how large their scale or how profitable they are, we will not allow their operation whatsoever.
With 15 years of environment restoration, Huju has become China's first prefecture-level pilot demonstration zone for ecological.
Now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.